Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we welcome you once again on this Wednesday evening to the airwaves of Salam Media, our listeners, our viewers on the various platforms of Salam Media. Wonderful that you are able to join us once again in conversation with myself, Inayat Wadi, where we unpacked a whole host of issues. And in recent times, almost the entire focus has been on the Middle East and the developments in the Middle East. And I must say, things are developing at a tremendous pace, and one day uh, different to the next, and one day more surprising than the next one as well. And especially when one looks at what's taking place out in Palestine and in Syria. And we always seem to be asking this question, what is next? Now, we know at this point in time, Palestine, there is a temporary ceasefire at this point in time, but also looking at what had transpired this morning when we woke up. The United States of America, the meeting between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. And yeah, we have had Donald Trump talking about owning Gaza. He's talking about a long-term ownership, which we will be covering in the second half of the broadcast with my guest, Mohammed Noordin. But just taking a look at Palestine and Syria in particular, we are joined this evening by Dr. Rahaf Aldoughli, lecturer in Middle East and North African Studies at the Lancaster University, and also political analyst from the UK who is in South Africa as we speak right now, Mazhar Khan. And it's time now to welcome both our guests this evening onto the show. And I see both my guests are coming through. Dr. Rahaf, welcome to the show, and salams to you as well. And much appreciated that you've taken time out this evening with us right here on Salam Media.
Thank you very much.
And to you, Mazhar Khan, assalamu alaikum to you. Welcome, and great having you as always.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. And as always, it's a pleasure to be on your show. And again, thank you for inviting me on your show.
Yes, Mazhar, I'm going to begin with you and just, getting an overview because, I mentioned things are happening at a tremendous pace at this point in time when one looks at both Syria and at Palestine. And just your overview and just looking at some of the recent developments in the last few days.
As you say, it's a moving issue. Things are changing and new issues are happening day by day. Trump's made some announcements today talking about, forcibly, he says not forcibly, but forcibly moving the entire population of Gaza into the surrounding areas. But if we take a step back and we look at the situation, this is not the first ceasefire. Since 1948, there's been many ceasefires, and the trajectory has always been the depopulation and the occupation of more land. And that is a constant trajectory we have seen over the years. And we've seen the impotency of the international-led world order do anything to protect the rights of the people of that land. And we've seen now, I think Gaza has shown something which has not been shown previously by the previous incidents, is that now that a lot of things are open and naked for people to see. You don't have to be an expert in the field of geopolitics. You don't have to be an expert in politics in general to understand what's happening. And we see that now even the West is saying that, we've always known that the international-led world order in international laws, it's been a one-way street. So the rest of the world, Africa, Asia, the Muslim world, has to adhere to these international rules, but somehow they don't seem to apply in the same way to the Western powers. So they've gone and done stuff without any kind of repercussions, illegal wars, invasions, and all sorts of things like that. Now, we've also seen now from Gaza, which we've not seen before, is now the Western world themselves saying that because the international rule-based world order doesn't work for them anymore, they don't want to play by it. So America has withdrawn from the United Nations Human Rights Charter. They're saying that the international courts don't have jurisdictions over them. They've talked about taking over Greenland and Canada and all sorts of stuff. So it's become extremely chaotic, and we're entering into a new era. It's going to be, I think things are going to happen a lot more quicker than they've happened in the past.
Well, shukran for that, Mazhar. And let's just bring Dr. Rahaf in. Dr. Rahaf, from what Mazhar is obviously talking talking about, clearly things are happening at a pace, but also looking at the crisis, and given the ongoing crisis both in Palestine and Syria, how do you see the broader geopolitical landscape evolving in the Middle East?
Well, thank you very much for having me again. And I think if it was not for this kind of fractured or the remaking of the geopolitical dynamics, we wouldn't have seen actually the fall of Assad. Unfortunately, what happened in Gaza and that kind of mass destructions and the genocide against Palestinians in Gaza has all kind of also contributed to the fall of Assad in Syria. So I see it as the 7th of October was a transformative momentum actually in the geopolitical dynamics in the governing or dominating the Middle East, specifically with the Israeli attacks, the systematic attacks on Iranian militias or positions, military positions in Syria, all contributed to the latest offensive led by HTS to be able to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. Now, in terms of the geopolitical dynamics, I think Israel has been expanding in southern Syria, and this is quite not been attracting so much media coverage, whether in the West and also in the Arab world, and that's quite I would agree with Mazhar, where we say we are not surprised by seeing that Israel is doing that expansion or violating human rights. Israel has always been doing that and continue to do, and what we see, the expansion of Israel into certain positions in southern Syria is again a marker of that continuation of violations both of lands and sovereignty of other countries or neighboring countries such as Syria. Now, in terms of what happens in Syria, we see, I think we are now in a position of a rise of a middle power like Turkey and maybe Saudi Arabia, specifically in the governing the Syrian landscape. We see more of a also Qatari and Turkish repositioning in the Syrian landscape, and also Saudi Arabia. It's still very early for me to see whether there will be rivalry among Saudis or Qataris as what happened in Egypt before, but definitely there is an external dynamics playing, and it's gonna shape the next phase for Syrians.
Well, clearly, and I think, Mazhar, just following up from what Dr. Rahaf is saying, we're seeing this increased global awareness, particularly with regard to activism, and we've seen it with regard to Palestine. And as Dr. Rahaf mentioned, that there hasn't been a lot of focus on Syria, where Palestine obviously has overshadowed Syria. But again, when one looks at the international players, when one talks about international pressure in terms of how these policies are actually being defined, and a clear example was this meeting between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump, which I think caught the world by surprise. It even caught the Arab nations by surprise, and we've seen the reaction come through from many of these countries. And again, talking about Palestine being non-negotiable, there should be no compromise. So a lot seems to be playing out in the background that is catching the Middle East by surprise, and we're becoming more, I would say, more reactionary to what is being discussed and what is being said, and what is actually just taking place generally.
I'm surprised that they're surprised, because they had the experience of the Balfour Declaration, where Britain said one thing, did another thing. We found that in 1948, when the UN resolution was passed to partition Palestine, it never happened. The Zionists occupied most of Palestine. Nothing happened after that. So each and every time, whenever the Western nations say something or promise something to the Palestinian side or to the Muslim side, we find that that is not honored. So it's not the first time. So that's why, we shouldn't be surprised if some promises are made, even now, the ceasefire. The killing may have sort of reduced in Gaza, but there's killings now taking place and expulsions taking place and bombings and destruction taking place in Jenin as we speak. So what they say is not to be trusted. And I think we should have learned from that. And the fundamental problem we have trying to solve the issue in Palestine is that the rulers in that region, they try to play by the international rule-based order. And what happens is each of these nation states have their own interests, which they try to protect. And obviously, there's going to be areas where they have tensions. So Turkey's going to have some kind of tensions with the Saudis. Historically, the Saudis had tensions with the Iranians, and the Gulfs have got tensions with the Turks, and Egypt's got its own issues. So what happens is America uses these players in order to move to the solution that they want, and they use these players, and they'll press their pressure points in order to get want to act in a particular way and want to step down. And because of the nation state world order, and because of these powers in that region submitting to this American-led world order, the solution is always determined and defined by the West. So we saw that in Tunisia. We saw that unfolding in Libya, as it's still ongoing there. We saw that with Morsi and his replacement, Sisi, coming into power in Egypt. And we've also seen how they've managed the change here in Syria. So relying upon the international institutions and the structures, we find, is a failure. And I think really Muslims really need to think outside of the box and think about utilizing the vast numbers that they have, the vast resources they have, and the vast strategic lands that they have, and the huge populations that they have, that we don't need to rely upon the failed international world order and their institutions in order to provide a solution for Palestine. It's not beyond our ability to act independently and solve this problem. Because there's one very important thing that distinguishes the Muslim world from the Western world. Regardless of the amount of technology, the weapons, army, economy, money they may have, there's one thing they don't have, and that's the concept of sabr, perseverance. And Gaza showed that they are prepared for every last building to be demolished, but they are not going to leave that land. Now, the West is not going to do that. The West will fight their wars based on an Excel spreadsheet, based on cost and benefit analysis. When it becomes too expensive, they will change their goals and move out. We saw that in Iraq, America didn't achieve its political goals, they moved out. We saw that in Afghanistan, that America didn't achieve its political goals and moved out and had to try a different approach. So when it comes to costs, that's their Achilles heel. But Muslims, we will continue and persevere until we achieve what we want to achieve. And we saw that is the dynamic which allowed the nascent Islamic polity in Medina to bring about the end of the centuries-old Persian Empire and the Roman Empire, which were far more sophisticated, far more developed, far more economically and materially stronger than the Muslim Islamic State in Medina. Yet they overpowered them because of this concept of perseverance. And that is something that we need to fall back on.
Yes, Mazhar. But also, Dr. Rahaf, Mazhar talks about this international rule-based order, and just looking at it from a Syrian perspective, and looking at obviously the Assad regime, both Bashar and prior to that, his father as well. So this international rule-based order at that point in time with both the Assads, the father and the son, had actually allowed what we see, allowed the catastrophe that had actually unfolded in Syria for a very, very long time. Now, just looking at it from your perspective, and we've seen again with the pace of the removal of Bashar al-Assad, and things are happening pretty fast, pretty quickly out in Syria at this point in time. Just looking at developments at this point in time, we've already started seeing the involvement with the likes of Saudi Arabia. We've seen we've seen leaders obviously starting to take a huge interest in what is playing out in Syria. Just what is your reading and just looking at these developments and the pace with which they are moving at this point in time? How do you see it?
Well, thank you very much for that questions. I want to follow on Mr. Mazhar kind of contribution towards like the West and the East, or Muslims versus the other nation. I would like to say like our experiences as Syrians has not been very much different from Palestine. We have seen the failure of international community, the failure of the UN. And actually, all of these UN processes or the UN delegations to Syria has not only failed, but even fractionalized the conflict even more and solidified. And all the humanitarian aid that kept coming from the UN and Western countries went to directly to entrenching and solidifying the authoritarianism of the regime. So the West has not always been kind of um, uh, honest about their promises, or even any of kind of holding liberal democracy or human rights. So, however, actually, Syria is a different case from Palestine. It's totally kind of what started as peaceful mass protest in 2011 suddenly kind of resulted in the emergence of hundreds of rebel groups, of different rebel groups. That these rebel groups also, in a few years' time, started to fight each other. And then I can kind of summarize that we have four armed factions. One is the Syrian Democratic Forces in northeast Syria, where it's backed up by the US, and we have US troops there. And we have Syrian National Army, which is backed up and funded by Turkey and Qatar in northern Syria. And then we have HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is led by current president, newly just positioned president Ahmed al-Shara, who was previously al-Jolani. Among these groups, there were always infighting. Now, after the fall of Assad, HTS, as I said, led by Ahmed al-Shara, they've been calling about dissolving these different armed groups. Now, the last 3 years of my research has been actually conducting fieldwork and interviews with central commanders. And from my interviews with central commanders up to the last 3 days when I was in Syria, now I don't think the unification or the dissolvement of these Syrian different armed factions are more of a cohesive one. So there would be lots of challenges on how to unify or to construct a Syrian national army because there is still lack of trust and lack of a clear, transparent idea of how to build the military again. So I think among all of these challenges, we have also the economic sanctions that have been imposed on Syria for the last, not only for the last decade, and these sanctions are not gonna be lifted over one day, because still the West are using that as a tool to manipulate the new leaders in Syria. Now, we also have another challenge in Syria, that the current president is already listed as a terrorist man. And all of these kind of challenges among the economy, the political, the military, are, I think, going to be interweaving together. And I do think that there is a lots of hope after the fall of Assad, after more than 5 decades of entrenched authoritarianism. However, we still are facing, or gonna face, these kind of big challenges: the military, the economy, and also the political arena.
Yes, thank you for that, Dr. Rahaf. Mazhar, when one looks at both Palestine and Syria, when you look at Palestine, it's been about resistance. It's in Syria as well, to an extent. And also both these countries obviously looking at what their political futures are going to be like. And again, they both faced with similar problems in terms of reconstruction, which is a major problem at this point in time. But they also faced with what is termed as regional influence. Now, Dr. Rahaf talks about unification being a challenge in Syria. The similar challenge exists in Palestine at this point in time. And what we've seen evolving in the last few days, and particularly with the release of the captives, where we've seen the show of strength by Hamas, which obviously tells us that Israel has actually failed in its objectives in Gaza. Hamas and the resistance movements are still as strong as ever in Gaza. And the thinking from the West again is about governance. Who is going to govern Palestine with a Hamas that has showed the strength? On the other side, you've got the Palestinian Authority. And again, when we talk about a unified challenge, that split between the PA and Hamas and the split between the various groupings, as Dr. Rahaf alluded to, in Syria as well, these are real challenges that both these countries are faced with, Mazhar.
You know, the problem is now that whenever these issues happen, like they in Gaza and Syria, the man who's appointed, like for example here in Syria, Jolani has now is now the appointed head of state. He's not been appointed by the people of Syria. Now, the Syrian people have sacrificed an enormous amount over the last decade or so, and they didn't sacrifice their life, their children, their livelihood, their homes for them to have another state in which they are not able to express themselves and live their lives based on the values they want to live by. Because Syria is a very blessed land, where it's very deeply Islamic, with a deep Islamic history and a Muslim culture amongst the people. So the problem now the West have is what's happened over the last few years. Jolani can't go as an out-and-out Western backed ruler. Although we've seen him now shaking hands with the Saudis, with the Turks, with all the other regional powers. So he's going to be facing a lot of pressure from a lot of other factions that already exist in Syria. There are many, many factions, rebel factions. And if Jolani starts to overstretch his remit and start to do things similar to what Assad did, or start to do things in the favor of the West, then he's not going to have that comfort that Bashar al-Assad had, and he will be removed a lot more quicker. So this is a very fluid situation, and the West may think that they have found a solution for Syria by appointing a former rebel leader to become the head of state. But the thing is, the Muslims will not tolerate more deception. What they faced before, if Jolani starts to behave like that again, he won't last as long as the Assad lasted. And I think the trajectory in the Muslim world is a very positive one. A lot of the leaders have been exposed. I mean, many of us political people, activists, analysts, we've known the motives behind the actions of Erdogan and the Saudi regime and the Egyptian regime. But now even the common people have come to know that these people can act when they want to act. But when it comes for the Islamic cause, or for the safety of the Palestinians or the security of the Syrians, they don't act in their interest. And they will give all kinds of boogeymen why they can't act. Erdogan will talk about the Kurd problem that stops him from acting. Erdogan will talk about the Kemalists that stop him from acting. But we saw when there was a coup a few years ago, he arrested 500,000 people in his state. Journalists, academics, military people, judges, professionals, professors, business people, many of them Kemalist. So there was no fear of Kemalist stopping him from doing that. He did that. He imposed emergency for 2 years. There was no Kemalist then. No Kemalist when he had arrested 500,000 people. No Kemalist when he imposed emergency law for 2 years. But when you ask him to act for Palestine or for Syria, suddenly, oh, I can't do this because my hands are tied. And we've seen that play out with all the other rulers. So they have now discredited themselves. So now the Muslims realize that, we can't rely upon these existing rulers who are submissive and submitting to the American Western-led world order. And I think this has become it's become more difficult for the West to try and solve the problem in the Middle East. It's not just Palestine and it's not just Syria, because the new problem for them is that the other regimes, especially Egypt, have become a lot weaker after October the 7th. Egypt has become a lot weaker. Jordan has become a lot unstable, and even the other regional powers have become a lot more insecure. So the problems are mounting for the West, and this hasn't ended by a long way. This is actually in the favor of the Muslims, and the trajectory is, inshallah, we will find a new type of a world order and a new political dynamic taking shape. But I think we are on the trajectory of that. And we've seen that America is no longer that strong. The international order is broken. The international institutions are discredited. So it's not that easy now for the West to ask the world to submit to the UN and the ICJ and all these UN bodies when America itself withdraws from the UNHCR, when America stops funding the UNRWA organization, when America says they're not under the jurisdiction of the international law. Well, if you're not under the jurisdiction of international law, then all the other countries in the world can claim the same thing. So we are entering into a very, very different future, immediate future. And this is an opportunity that, the Muslims really need to take hold of their own destiny and stop relying on others to shape it for them.
Yes, Mazhar, and also Dr. Rahaf, we're talking about an immediate future, but an immediate future in Syria should be about stability. And I just want to focus a bit on the risk of instability, and this after a decade of what we've seen. Syria was fragmented as well. How do you see this, and possibly looking at some of the biggest obstacles, that could impact on the stability and also at the same time prevent a unified Syria again?
I think we are heading towards a very fine line of either falling or just in a picture of like Syria is stable all over again. And I don't think we can think of certain terminologies such as a passive peace or an active peace. And I think if there is still the new leadership has not kind of shown confirmatory tone in terms of what the transitional justice will be, and that's quite kind of would bring instability at the social and political level. Another thing is that I think breaking the economy more might also destabilize the country. So, and in terms also we have the threat of ISIS and the threat of certain jihadi groups who are still active in Syria. So the new leadership is also trying to tackle all of these challenges together in order to kind of at least bring some stability to Syrians. But is it going to happen in 1 day or 2 or 3 months? I don't think so. And I think there is a need to learn from other examples, such as what happened in Rwanda, in Bosnia Herzegovina, and even in Sierra Leone, and see how the conflict resolutions was facilitated. I don't think Western intervention would do benefits to Syrians, but at least we need certain neutral kind of collaborations among Syrians, not the new leaders, Syrians, civil society organizations, and these kind of international ones, in order to put some pressure in case that a new authoritarianism is in the making.
Thank you for that, Dr. Rahaf. To Mazhar as well, we're going to go for a quick ad break. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Searching for elite local and international investment and advisory services from an award-winning firm? Look no further than the Belmont Mayer Group, your gateway to unparalleled investment and wealth management. At Belmont Mayer, we believe in the art of wealth creation, a meticulous process fueled by our unwavering commitment to excellence. With a focus on providing elite alternative investments and quality advice, we also pride ourselves on maximizing value for our esteemed investors, as seen through our consistent outperformance. Your financial success is our top priority. Join us at Belmont Mayer and experience the difference firsthand. Ready to embark on a journey of greatness? Contact us today. Reach out to the Belmont Mayer Group on 078 786 1698. Call or WhatsApp or email us at info@belmontmayor.com. Elevate your financial future with Belmont Mayor, where every detail matters.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Penny Appeal's Education First campaign helps children to get access to quality education.
I'm 14 years old. When I grow up, I'd like to be a scientist.
We believe every child belongs at school,
And we want education, a better education.
learning and dreaming their way to a better future. With your help, we can provide classrooms, desks, stationery packs, and school shoes. Help make these dreams a reality. Visit www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573. Penny Appeal. Small change, big difference.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
Conveniently located along the banks of the Crocodile River bordering the Kruger National Park, as a guest at Buckler's Africa Lodge, one can enjoy an amazing sunrise or sunset on our spacious deck area while you catch a glimpse of some wildlife sightings along the Crocodile River. The sounds of the African savannah will greet you whilst you enjoy your morning coffee. Buckler's Africa Lodge by Tingana Collection. Buckler's Africa Lodge is ideally situated only 6 kilometers from the Crocodile Bridge Gate in the Kruger National Park. Catering for all travelers with variety, we have 4 types of the finest rooms: superior rooms, deluxe suites, and 2-bedroomed family units. Each room is equipped with the finest amenities to make your stay unforgettable. Guests can choose between the self-catering option or book their accommodation with breakfast and dinner included. Buckler's Africa Lodge is your ideal location for the ultimate Kruger getaway experience. We specialize in exhilarating and educational game drives in Kruger, tailor-made to suit your family. Inquire about our various accommodation offerings and other activities. Visit www.tingana.co.za for more information. Buckler's Africa Lodge by Tingana Collection. Experience the pulse of Africa with us.
Abu Huraira narrated that he heard the Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, say, "In black seed there is a healing for every disease except death." This Ramadan, experience the health benefits of this ancient blessed seed by using the Tib Black Seed range. Black seed assists the body to boost immunity, regulate blood sugar levels, reduce inflammation, and act as a potent antioxidant. Experience a holistic approach to health by introducing the Tib Black Seed range into your Ramadan routine. Available in capsules, pure cold-pressed oil, and a vapor rub. Trust Tib Health Sciences for quality black seed products. For more information, visit blackseed.co.za. Available at leading pharmacies.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Well, we continue our broadcast this evening with my guest, Mazhar Khan and Dr. Rahaf Aldoughli. I don't see her on screen. Perhaps she's lost contact and she's possibly trying to log in again. But Mazhar, let us just continue. And I think what is important to understand here is with the contempt that Donald Trump and the United States of America have actually shown to international law, humanitarian law, international institutions, all of this, looking at some of the other players, the major players, regional players, even countries like Iran, Russia, Turkey, and obviously these countries have an interest in shaping the future of both Syria and Palestine. And how do you see their role against the arrogance that we've seen displayed by the United States of America?
You know, just before the break, Dr. Rahaf mentioned about the immediate need to create stability, and I think that's an important and aim that needs to be achieved. But the problem we face is, how can you have lasting stability when you have got a murderous, genocidal colony, which they call Israel, in the Middle East, which has no respect for the borders of any other country, does not care for the rule-based world order, which is imposed on the rest of the players, who can get away with anything because America is always going to cover for them. So whatever solution that is imposed on Syria or Gaza that allows for this entity to exist, for America to have influence in the area, and for these regional players that you speak about, for them to be subservient to the American world order, regardless of what they may say in their speeches, we can see by their actions what they do. As long as that is maintained, then the stability or the security which will be achieved in Syria or Gaza will be very short term until the next crisis emerged, because these are the factors that cause that creates this instability that leads to these problems. So, you know, previously when Islam was in this area, we had stability for long periods of time with different demographics of people, Muslims, Jews, Christians, all sorts of people lived there, because the world was organized based on different dynamics, not based on nationalistic states or national entities and, you know, caring for the people. So as long as we have this kind of governance and world order, then really it's going to be very difficult. Well, that's what they will say, very difficult. I will say impossible to create any kind of stability in this area. And, you know, we saw what happened in Gaza. And, you know, Turkey was giving all these speeches about, you know, we're with the Gazans, we support them. But throughout that time, 60% of the fuel imported by the Zionist colony came directly from Turkey. You know, Jordan defended the Zionist colony whilst they were committing genocide by shooting the Iranian projectiles. Iran, when it launched the projectiles, they gave something like 3-4 days notice to everybody what they were going to do. So everybody had enough time to stop them from reaching the Zionists. And we saw also the treachery by the Egyptians by closing the border and profiting by the few Gazans that could leave the border and charging them like $5,000 US just to cross the border. So they've laid themselves bare for the whole ummah to see how they behaved during the genocide. So if they are going to be the players that are going to shape any kind of the stability in Syria or in Gaza, then I think the Muslim ummah are not going to be very hopeful at best, and at worst, they may not accept it and take matters into their own hands. So I really am not hopeful of any kind of stability or security emanating from what America is dictating to that region. And, you know, they spoke about, the doctor spoke about Bosnia. You know, Bosnia has been on tenterhooks ever since the war. You know, there's no security there, and the Serbian nationalists are still there, and it's still unstable. And what they imposed on Bosnia after the Serbian massacre of the Muslims in Bosnia as a land was divided into 3 parts. So When Yugoslavia fell apart, the international world allowed the Serbs to have a state. The international order allowed the Croats to have a state, but Bosnia was divided into three parts. The Serbs had a part, the Croats had a part, and the Bosnians had a part, and the national leader would rotate between these three parts. So it was a humiliation. So the Bosnians don't really have a state. They had no other choice. To stop the killing, they had to accept a state where 2/3 was taken, and they were left with 1/3, and they had no sovereignty in their own land. So, this is the kind of peace they want, is of humiliation and subjugation.
Yes, Mazhar. And also, I think, what we've seen now come through from both Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu is an open call for ethnic cleansing, because this is exactly what it is. And, displacing and Trump obviously didn't come very, very clean in terms of what he actually meant by cleaning out Gaza. He spoke so much, and he spoke about all the bombs and unexploded bombs, and concerned about the safety of the people of Gaza. Yet these were the very bombs that were supplied by the United States of America, that rained for well over 15 months on a daily basis. And once again, as far as leverage is concerned, with statements like these, and you mentioned a weakened Egypt, you mentioned a weakened Jordan as well. To what extent has Saudi Arabia been weakened? We've seen strong language come through, talking about a total rejection of what Trump has said, unwavering position, non-negotiable, no compromise. Now, these are very, very strong words that have been used. But to what extent will they apply pressure, or are they able to apply pressure? Do they have the leverage to prevent what Trump and both him and Netanyahu are saying?
You see, when we talk about words, I think MBS in Saudi Arabia said recently, I think even just today, he said that we want a Palestinian state on the 1967 borders, and he went on about all of these things. Trump, on the other hand, clearly said that Saudi Arabia has not put any kind of condition down for a Palestinian state for normalizing relations with Israel. So the Saudis have to speak like that to the Muslim Ummah, because they know they will not accept it. But behind the scenes, they've said to the Americans, we don't care about any Palestinian state. So they play this double game. And I think we saw that with other rulers as well. Erdogan did the same thing. Erdogan was talking about, I'm with the Gazans, whilst he was supplying fuel, supplying exports to that Zionist colony, and not just now, but for many decades. And the other players have done the same as well. So we shouldn't judge these rulers by their words. We should judge them by their actions. And the actions speak for themselves, not just now over Gaza, but over the past few decades. So the fact that they have to speak with a forked tongue shows that they are weak, they are not powerful. Like Trump can speak his mind. Trump can say that I want to clean out Gaza, I want to kick those people out, right? But these rulers can't speak their mind. Just goes to show you that these are not rulers who are in charge or have authority or in power. They are sitting on a chair and they have a title, but they are not able to speak openly and freely what they want to do. And what they do is more clear of their intentions and what they actually do believe in. So I don't think we should give too much credibility to what they say, and we should monitor and view their actions and judge them based on that.
Mazhar, just finally, what's next for the Palestinians, and particularly those in Gaza? We've seen the mass exodus from the south to the north, the mountains of rubble, and where does this actually leave the people of Gaza? The annexation of the West Bank, you mentioned Jenin as well at this point in time, another flashpoint, and just generally in terms of Palestine, their struggle for freedom, their struggle for liberation, where does it leave them? And we know that Hamas has also rejected what Donald Trump has to say, but Hamas obviously has displayed even, and I mentioned it earlier with the captive handover, that they are still in a position of strength.
You know, brother Inayat, if we look at the world as it is, Gaza is destroyed. People don't even have tents to live in. Forget houses, they don't even have tents to live in. They can't rely on the international institutions. They can't rely upon the Arab rulers. It's a dire, dire situation. It seems hopeless. It seems hopeless. But if we look back into our history, and if we look at the times when there was hopelessness, and one of the incidents that comes to mind is when Medina was surrounded by the Ahzab, something like 10,000 men from all the different Arab tribes had surrounded Mecca. When the Jewish tribes within Medina had now allied itself with the Arab allies, it looked very glum. And you know, we know from our history that even the Quran speaks about what the Munafiq used to say is, we can't even go to the toilet at night, and you, referring to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are seeing Muslims conquering Persia and Rome and Yemen and these places, and we can't even go and relieve ourselves. That was such a dark time. But because the people persevered and because they stood firm on principle, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them victory from where they could not perceive it. And a man from Ghatafan came, he spun a trick amongst the allied forces, broke the alliance, and the Muslims were able to save their state. So and even before the Hijrah, the Muslims were in a very dark situation. We believe in Allah. We believe in the Nasr of Allah. We believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has power over all things. And I firmly believe that what the Muslims in Gaza have done, maybe because of their sacrifices, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless this ummah with a victory sooner rather than later. Maybe we can't perceive it with our eyes and ears, but I have hope that, you know, we will stand firm. We will call for what is right. We will not compromise and accept subjugation. And I truly, truly, truly believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not forsake the people in Gaza, will not forsake the people in Syria, and this ummah will unite, and we will find a solution, because the solution is coming from the heavens and not from our own abilities. So I am very hopeful
Inshallah,
in the
Ameen.
long term. Ameen.
Well, certainly. In fact, I think we all are hopeful, and also we remain hopeful considering what has happened in the last 15 months, and yet people are still standing. They're still standing very, very strong. So alhamdulillah, you know, that again only comes from above. It only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their resolve, their resilience, their ability to withstand oppression and brutality in its worst form. And yet we see them standing as they have been standing for well over 7 decades as well. So we still remain hopeful, Brother Mazhar. Jazakallah khairan so much for that. And obviously, I believe you are coming to my part of the world, inshallah, on Friday. So looking forward to meeting you.
We will meet soon, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Mazhar Khan joining us, Muslim activist from the United Kingdom, who is in South Africa at this point in time. We're going to go for a break. And next up, Trump and Netanyahu, the ethnic cleansing in Gaza and realignment of Middle East politics. And I will be in conversation with Mohammed Noor Nordin, who is an independent political analyst. So a lot more to come on Salam Media. Stay with us, and we'll see you on the other side.